Cozy fantasy is a genre that has been gaining a lot of popularity recently. I thought I had outgrown fantasy as an adult, but once I picked up some low-stakes, high fantasy books, I realized that couldn't be farther from the truth. By definition, cozy fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy literature that emphasizes comfort, warmth, and a sense of community, home, and belonging. It is typically low stakes, and it often involves slice-of-life scenarios. After understanding what cozy fantasy is all about, I realized I had read a couple of cozy fantasy books, which I ended up loving, but I did not realize at the time that they were cozy fantasy. Now I understand why I loved them so much. Slice of life books are my kind of books, and pairing them with fantasy makes it even more magical. So today I have 9 low-stakes, high fantasy books to share with you all. The first book I read and fell in love with is Legends and Lattes by Baldree. I gushed over this in my mid-year bookish tag, and I'm gonna do it again in this video. Legends and Lattes. Before I even tell you what it's about, let me just say, if you're only gonna pick one book from this list that I'm about to share, pick this book. It is just amazing and a 10 out of 10. Legends and Lattes is about an orc whose life is filled with bloodshed, battles, and danger at every turn due to her line of work, which is being a bounty hunter. But all of this changes when Viv the orc decides to put down her sword and start a new chapter in life. And so the orc who has only ever known fighting decides to settle down at one place and open a cafe. In this world, coffee exists, but it is a rare and exotic commodity that is not widely known. Viv herself encountered it once during one of her missions, and that is where she got the idea of starting a coffee shop. The people who live where she decides to set up her cafe have never heard of coffee, and so naturally they have no idea what it is. So we get to follow Viv as she slowly builds her new business, and we see her try to convince people to try out this drink they've never heard of and hopefully become loyal customers. This book does a really great job at making coffee seem like a novelty. It is like in real life somebody trying to tell you water is so fascinating. It's water. If you're a human, you know water, so it's never gonna be fascinating. You just know you need it to live. But in this book, this author, he does a great job in making coffee seem interesting, even for readers who will already know what coffee is. I feel like I could stay in the world of Legends and Lattes forever. Well, not forever, but for long periods of time. It truly provided great moments of escapism, and I loved how immersive the whole story felt. I went back and forth between being fascinated and rolling my eyes as the characters were trying coffee for the first time. At times, I was right there with them, fascinated at the sight of coffee beans, the process of making coffee, experiencing the aroma, and finally drinking it. Other times, I just couldn't match the same level of novelty the characters were experiencing because it is coffee after all. But even when I couldn't experience the same level of fascination as the characters, I still enjoyed the story at every point. And I think that has to do with the simple yet highly engaging writing style that the author uses. If there is one book that I would recommend to anyone, especially people who just want to get back into reading or somebody who finds themselves in a reading slump, it would be this book because it is so simple to read. It doesn't require a lot of brain power, but the story itself is just wonderful, out of lack of a better word. Yeah, it is just wonderful, and what can I say? I love this book. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna was another cozy fantasy that I loved reading. This story explores loneliness, self-isolation, how losing a parent or losing your parents can affect you even in later years, and the joy of finding a sense of belonging with people you never thought you would connect with and people who would fully accept you for who you are. With this story, you get magic, you get romance, you get the found family trope, all wrapped up in a heartwarming and adorable package. We follow Mika Moon, who is one of the few witches in Britain. She lost her parents at a very young age and she was taken in by another witch. Growing up, the witch who raised her wasn't very present in her life, both physically and emotionally. So Mika learned early on to be comfortable in her own company, keep to herself, and navigate life without letting anyone get too close. This lifestyle is seen as perfectly normal for witches in this world, and that is because they must keep their powers a secret from regular human beings, and their social norms demand that witches must isolate themselves from each other. Because when you do get a lot of witches in the same area, they do tend to draw some attention to themselves, especially those who do not have enough control of their power. It's a very lonely way of living, but it is their normal. Everything changes when Mika decides to start a YouTube channel and pretend that she is a witch. She doesn't think any regular human being will notice, but someone does, and that person reaches out to her. She receives an invitation to visit a remote house called Nowhere House. While she is there, she gets a job offer to teach 3 young witches how to control their magic. Typically, witches are taught control by their guardians, but Mika finds that the guardian of these 3 witches is nowhere to be found. Having grown up alone and having to teach herself everything that she knows about control and just being a witch, Mika can relate, and she finds that she cannot say no to this offer. There are many rules that come with being a witch, and Mika has already broken a lot of them. Instead of keeping her magic a secret, she showcased it on her YouTube channel, thinking that no human would be smart enough to decipher that she is a real witch. She also did not inform the leader witches in her area about the young witches with no guardian and uncontrollable magic. To make matters worse, once she starts working at Nowhere House, she realizes there's more to what the people at Nowhere House told her, and that more that she still doesn't know could be something that is bad. I liked many aspects of this book. The writing makes it super easy to picture the world and all the magical elements that come with it. Speaking of magic, the magic that the witches can do feels so down to earth and simple, while also being otherworldly and very charming. When it comes to the pacing, it is even and it creates a calming and relaxing experience. It doesn't give you that feeling of being at the edge of your seat from reading a book that has high stakes and unknown outcomes. Instead, it offers a joy and excitement that feels familiar, comfortable, and relaxing even if you don't know what will happen next. There is a romance in the story, but if it was meant to be the main storyline, I think the book didn't get the memo. Or rather, the author did not get the memo. What held my attention more than the romance was everything that was happening around it, which personally I liked and found to be more interesting. I love it when characters are written as people who have more to their lives than just fulfilling a love story. However, it did not seem like it was intentional for the romance to take a backseat in this book, but I like that it happened that way. I only have one issue when it comes to this book, and that is how the climax of the story unfolded. The danger that was presented was overly dramatized, and its resolution was very anticlimactic, even for a low-stakes kind of book. The main character is the one who built up the antagonist's powers and ability to really do a lot of damage, and when they finally came face to face, it was just very underwhelming. I at least expected a dramatic fight or something, and that resolution gave us nothing. Regardless of that, I ended up liking this book, and I did give it 4 stars. It's a book I can definitely pick up again, and I'm sure I'll still enjoy the story. It has gotten so cold that I had to grab a blanket. But anyway, next is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Emily Fawcett. This book shines a spotlight on quirky characters in the academic world. It's a story full of travel and adventure with a touch of the found family trope. The main character is Cambridge professor Emily Wilde. She has made it her life's mission to study everything about the fairies that inhabit her world. We meet her in the middle of writing the world's first encyclopedia of fairy lore. To finish her research, she travels to a small village known as Harrowsley to research the the fairies that live there. Let me just confess, there were a lot of names in this book that I had no idea on how to pronounce, but I was also too lazy to stop and look up the pronunciation, so I just did some guesswork and continued with the story. With that said, if I do mispronounce certain names as I do this review, please bear with me and maybe just ignore it. Emily is an introvert and socially awkward, so she finds that the art of telling social cues is not something that comes naturally to her. When she interacts with people, she sometimes rubs them the wrong way. She doesn't really have any friends and prefers it that way because books are better company for her compared to people. And due to her extreme antisocial behavior, most people do not stick around, except for Wendell Bumblebee. He is the opposite of Emily. Where she is awkward, he is charming. Where she struggled with communication, he excelled. Wendell is also a professor at Cambridge, and he happens to be Emily's only friend. Not because of any effort on her part, but because he always inserts himself into Emily's life at every turn. So by default, over the years, he became Emily's only friend. When Emily travels to her off-stake, Wendell follows her and offers to help her complete her research. Initially, they discover harmless fairies who can be reasoned with, but later on, they also discover there are powerful fairies who enjoy doing horrendous things to humans just for the fun of it. Now, Emily is obsessed with her work, and given that she has no social life, her research is everything to her. The question becomes, will she know when to stop poking around because things have become too dangerous? Or will she continue for the sake of science and risk lives, including her own? Additionally, this trip challenges Emily and Wendell by pushing them out of their comfort zone. Emily does not like socializing, and she has a mindset that every interaction is transactional. If you do this for me, then I have to do this for you. But on this trip, her way of thinking is constantly challenged, and she has to learn to adapt or risk becoming an outsider even more than she has ever been. Wendell, on the other hand, is not your typical male lead. He prefers a life where everyone does everything for him, and he can simply sit down, relax, and enjoy as everything is being done for him. I don't think I've read about a main male character that is like this and is okay with being like this. You know, somebody who is powerful and can get things done, but they prefer to just be a spoiled brat and let everyone else do everything for them while they just sit back and relax and enjoy. And that is written as not a bad thing, but part of the charm that makes up his character. He goes as far as to get his students to do things for him that are not necessarily ethical, like washing his clothes. But unfortunately for him, when he follows Emily into the village, he finds himself in situations where he can't always convince other people to do his bidding. So we follow the two as they navigate the fairy world, their personalities, and their friendship with each other. In the end, I decided I like this book, but I do have a few things I did not enjoy while I was reading the book. The writing style of this book sometimes felt like, actually not sometimes, I think all the time, I think that was the vibe, but it felt like an academic paper, which in certain moments took me out of the story and made it a bit tedious to read. Additionally, it had footnotes, and I discovered that my pet peeve when it comes to reading books is footnotes. I hate them. That's the conclusion I came to after reading this book. I hate it when fiction books have footnotes. I presume this was intentional because the story is about two characters in the academic world, but it didn't make it any less annoying. Every time I had to click on an asterisk that led me to a passage with an even smaller font to explain a certain term in depth, then I have to go back to the chapter I was in to continue reading. It just took me out of the story. The last thing I didn't like was the ending, and I think the author ended things that way because this book has a sequel. Either way, it felt like the author crafted a really well thought out story but gave no importance to the ending. It was underwhelming to say the least. Despite these cons, they are not deal breakers. The footnotes came close, but they are not deal breakers. Depending on the reader, you might be bothered like I was, or you might not even care. A Psalm for the Wilde Build by Becky Chambers. A Psalm for the Wilde, built by Becky Chambers, is a book for anyone who feels lost in life, behind in life, disinterested in life, or unsure if they are making the right choices. This book feels like a trusted friend who truly sees you and understands you, sitting you down, giving you a warm hug and telling you it's going to be okay, and giving you a realistic explanation as to why exactly it will be okay. That reassurance, support, and encouragement becomes everything you needed to figure out how to make yourself okay, be happy, and be at peace with where your life is currently at, and also know how to continue living in the way that is best for you. This story takes us to a world where mankind created robots to help with the burden of manual labor. Eventually, and no one knows why, the robots started developing independent thinking and they became self-aware. They realized they did not like living as machines and doing whatever the humans wanted them to do, so they asked to be freed. The humans didn't put up any kind of a fight. They were more than okay respecting their wishes and letting them go. The robots went on to live in areas that were not inhabited or easily accessible by humans. Once they left, the robots made a pact among each other to return once in a while and check in on the humans by asking them, what do you need? Or rather, what do people need? Once the question was answered, they would help the humans and then return to their homes. In this story, we meet a monk who is questioning his life choices, and he feels like there is more that he could do with his life, even though he doesn't exactly know what that more entails. He decides to leave everything behind and become a tea monk, traveling while making people tea to earn a living. He hopes this journey will help him figure out the meaning of his existence. He becomes the first person to encounter the robots after a really long time, because the robots had not been seen ever since they requested to be freed. This robot that he encounters is also the first robot that has been sent to check in on the humans and ask, what do people need? When it asks the monk this question, it realizes that there is no universal answer to this one question. So that means it will have to go around asking every single person it meets, what do you need, so that it can figure out how to help, and once it has helped, it can go back to its home. The problem is the first human it asks is a person who feels lost in life. So the two journey together to help each other find answers, and this turns into a story that tries to answer the question of what is the meaning of life. I think the beginning of this story starts out slow, but eventually things pick up and it turns into the most wholesome story with a very realistic and comforting message about what is the meaning of life. And one of my favorite things about this story is that it has the cutest character ever, and that is the robot. I yapped about how much I loved this robot in another video, and I'm just not over it. I want that robot as a best friend. I truly fell in love with the robot's charm and personality. It was an all-round positive experience reading this book, but there is one aspect that took me by surprise, not in a bad way, just in a it took me by surprise way. This is the first book I have ever read with a character that identifies with the pronouns they and them. For the first 4 or 5 pages, my brain was short-circuiting and I kept wondering, how did I pick up a book with grammatical errors? And how did I get my hands on a fake book? I know, it's very embarrassing. But once I finally put 2 and 2 together, I was able to enjoy the story. Personally, I believe that as long as you're not hurting anyone, everyone has the right to live their life how they want, and everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. But I will say, this experience made me realize how removed this way of identifying oneself is from some countries, specifically my own. Personally, I do not know anyone who identifies with these pronouns, and I do not think it's a thing in my country. I could be wrong. Anyway, I loved this book. It's more of a short story because I think it is under 200 pages, and I love that it has a realistic message about what is the meaning of life. And I think if you are feeling unsure about life and how you're choosing to live your life, it is something that can be helpful, at the very least very comforting, and something that can just give you a break from the chaos of having to live life as a human. Next is The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Natsukawa. If you want to get me to read a book with minimal effort, show me a book that features a cat and I'm already hooked. I am sold. Well, Cat Who Saved Books is all about books. It unfolds in a second-hand bookshop called Natsuki Book. Our main character is a boy called Rintaro who recently inherited the bookshop from his grandfather. He is a very shy and introverted person who would rather curl up with a good book than do anything else. He struggles with low self-esteem, and in social settings, he is not very talkative. One day, a cat shows up at Natsuki Books and asks Rintaro for help to save books that have been imprisoned. Together, they go on these magical adventures to free books from owners who are either mistreating the books or simply imprisoning the books in some sense of the word. There are a total of 3 quests, each different from the other, and the last one being the hardest. Essentially, the story is about finding your voice and recognizing that what you have to share has value even if you're not the loudest person in the room. It's also about self-love and allowing yourself to have experiences in life that bring you joy. Through each adventure that Rintaro goes on, the readers also learn that art in general holds a lot of value than we give it credit for. In such a fast-paced world where trends and what is considered cool is what we normally prioritize as humans, this story teaches us that it's important to never lose sight of the true worth that comes from our creations. I really wanted to love this. I went into it knowing I would love it, but unfortunately, it ended up being a disappointment. The story felt overly preachy and insisting on one way of viewing things. Anything else was deemed as bad or negative. It heavily promotes a one-size-fits-all mindset where divergent thinking automatically labels you as the villain. Apart from the preachy aspect of the book, I unfortunately did not like the persona of the cat. In the end, I gave this book 1 star because of how preachy it was, and I just didn't like the cat. Another book that felt preachy was The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. But in this case, it wasn't too overbearing to the point where it ruined the reading experience. The House in the Cerulean Sea takes us to a world where magical creatures and humans coexist. Among the humans, there are regular humans and there are humans with powers. Think Harry Potter, where the humans without powers are referred to as muggles, and those with magical abilities are referred to as witches or wizards. This story is told through the experience of our main character, Linus Baker, who is a caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth. One day, he is called in to take a case involving some of the most powerful kids. His mission is to go to the orphanage where the kids live, study and observe them, and come up with a report to determine whether they are a danger to society or they're not. I really liked this book because it has some magical world building that ignites your imagination in the best way possible. Everything felt very whimsical and enchanting. Despite the preachiness of it, it still made for a fun and wholesome read. The next book is yet another T.J. Klune book called Under the Whispering Door. This is a book that I DNF'd, and it is the only book on this list that I did DNF. But I mention it because I think reading is very subjective and I might have not liked it, but somebody else might think it's their favorite book. We follow our main character Wallace, who suddenly dies and finds himself face to face with a Grim Reaper who has come to take him to the afterlife. That sounds very morbid, but I assure you this is not a sad story. The journey to the afterlife takes days, and during this time, Wallace finds himself being introspective about how he lived his life back when he was alive. He realizes he has many regrets about how he lived his life, and he struggles with coming to terms with the fact that he is dead. Wallace is given a week before he has to cross to the other side, and he decides to take this time to live his life as he wishes he did while he was alive. Wallace is written in a way that makes you dislike him because he is a horrible person, but you get the gist that as the story progresses, you're meant to see his character go from a bad person into a good person, and you're eventually meant to like him. The thing is, I really did not care about Wallace, and I did not care about his journey. I think T.J. Klune wrote Wallace too well to the point where you just dislike him and don't really care enough to see him change from a bad person to a good person. So because I couldn't get myself to care about the main character, and where his journey was going, I DNF'd this book. The second last book is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is one of the most charming, cozy, and heartfelt books I've ever read. When we dive into fiction, we're all searching for that magical feeling that you get when you connect with a book so deeply. And this book delivered all that magic for me. The story unfolds in a cafe in Tokyo, but it isn't just any ordinary cafe. It's a cafe that allows people to time travel. So you can go to the future and you can go to the past. But as you can imagine, most people want to go to the past. Many hear about this place and dismiss it as fiction, but there are some who choose to believe and they decide to visit the cafe to see if it's actually true. The book is a collection of short stories, each story focusing on a person who decided to visit the cafe to time travel for various reasons. We have a person who wants to confront a past love, another who wants to speak to a spouse they lost to Alzheimer's, another who wants to talk to a sister that passed away, and lastly, a woman who wants to talk to a daughter she'll never meet because being pregnant means that one will survive, and of course she's gonna choose the life of the baby over hers. As we follow each character and get to understand their motivations for wanting to time travel, and also get to understand their personalities and the kind of relationships they had with these people they want to talk to, the story turns into something that is so touching and deeply moving. I think one thing that sets this book apart from other fiction books is everything feels so real, so realistic. It feels like there is a person on this planet who has gone through what some of the characters have gone through. And it just makes the characters and their journey incredibly relatable. And even if you haven't experienced this, or you don't even know anyone who has experienced this, it is something that you feel like has helped you understand humanity and perhaps helped you understand a person living somewhere that you have never visited, you have never met this person, but you feel like you understand an aspect of a human experience that you have not gone through personally. Last on this list is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. It is about a man who finds himself living in a strange and mysterious house that seems to have endless rooms, each unique and filled with both wonders and danger. Piranesi shares this vast space with only one other person that he has named the other. They rarely interact except on specific days where they meet to discuss the house. The other is an academic who believes the house holds profound knowledge that is waiting to be discovered, while Piranesi sees himself as an explorer who finds joy in venturing into the rooms and discovering what they hold. As Piranesi continues to explore, he begins to suspect that there is something sinister happening in the house. The book explores themes of emotional and psychological abuse and mental health in general. It also showcases human resilience and shows how we can always find joy and hope even in the most difficult situations. I found this book wonderful and truly enjoyed reading it. While I've seen there are some people who were moved to tears while reading this, I did not cry at all. Instead, I found myself in awe of Susanna Clarke's writing capabilities, and I definitely plan on reading more of her work. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if you're into bookish content and you would enjoy more videos like this, feel free to subscribe to my channel.